to order.
Or then I'm going to go on mute because otherwise you're going to listen to me cough all night. So welcome everybody. I'm Lynn Claremont. I'm the chair of the Library Trustees. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Remind everyone that it is being recorded.
Okay, I have attendance, so please say here when I call your name. Claremont?
Here.
Dirk's here. Fleckner is absent tonight. Roach is absent tonight. Secor?
Here.
Teal? Hazelton?
Here.
Zegowitz?
Here.
Walensky? Okay. Perkins? Okay.
Are you calling all the CESC members?
Yes, everyone who is supposed to be here for the entire list. So
Well,
Berlin.
CESC didn't call a meeting for tonight. So some of them are here in
Yeah,
attendance.
that's all right. I'm just determining who's here. So Beth is
here.
Beth Perkins is here. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mike Berlinski is also here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see him. Okay. Berlinski is here.
Not a panelist. He's in the audience right now.
Okay, thank you. Liedberg,
Here.
Rainville,
Here.
Monks.
Here. Sorry, here.
Thank you. That's all right. Anzalone,
Here.
Sao. Is he just, did you, Ellen, did you say he's just?
Not here.
No, he's not here yet, but we can start without him.
Okay, yep. And Penta, is she coming tonight?
She's just going to listen in.
Okay. And Bono Bunker?
Here.
All right, thank you.
May I just interrupt for one moment? Tom Teller has his hand raised. Let me just allow him to talk.
I was just trying to register my presence. I didn't hear my name. I'm Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee.
Okay, thank you.
So we do have some other clean energy members here, and I can introduce them when the time comes.
Okay, yep.
So maybe we can just explain that tonight is a posted meeting with the Board of Library Trustees where there is a quorum. It's co-hosted with members of the Permanent Town Building Committee and representatives of sustainability. And the library trustees here tonight are Chairman Claremont, Deb Teal, Secretary Buffy Dirks, and Glenn Secor. And I'm just going to ask Sue Thomas to introduce the members of CSAC who are here.
Certainly. So Tom Teller just introduced himself. He's a member of our committee. In the audience, we also have Erica Cole, Jerry DeBello, Mike Berlinski. So those are the other members of Clean Energy who are attending at this time. And we also have another select board member, John Cunningham, who's here as well. So thank you for everyone who could come and join us tonight.
And I'd also like to introduce Andrea Bono Bunker, who is the library building consultant liaison to our project from the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. And I think, as everyone knows, the MBLC is a major partner in the library project, and we are anticipating $8.6 million of funding over the course of this project. So we're very glad to have Andrea also marshaling this project along.
Thank you, Ellen.
And then I'd like to introduce Alicia Monks, who is the OPM from CHA Companies Incorporated, and Ellen Anceloni, who is a principal with Feingold Alexander Architects. And I will be turning it over to Susan, and I think actually Rebecca says she has Susan's slide as the very opening of the slide deck. So we'll let the presentation begin, and we will be catching all questions through our recording, and we have started a spreadsheet of all the questions and issues that people want to see addressed.
Ellen, I just wanted to say one thing. We have Rebecca Barry from our office. Rebecca's a principal in director of sustainability, and she's going to be the lead speaker from our group tonight.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Rebecca.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Quick technical issue. Someone needs to enable me to screen share.
Also, Erica Cole has her hand up at this point. Erica, I don't know if she can be elevated to speak or if.
I'm just trying to make it so that Rebecca can screen share.
Thank you.
If you hover at the bottom, yeah, there's a green.
I can share screen, but I don't know how to make it so Rebecca can share screen.
If you click, oh. If you click on the share screen, sometimes it'll say you can.
Multiple participants. Well,
Yeah.
can you see the screen share now?
Hold on. Bingo. That worked.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry. And Erica wants to, let me just allow Erica to
Oh,
talk.
hand is- Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it was noted earlier that Clean Energy didn't call a meeting, but I'm on the agenda center and it looks like there is a meeting called for the Clean Energy if you needed us to do anything. I just wanted to point that out.
there was some confusion with the agenda. It was the way it was posted, so it's not actually a posted meeting and we don't have a quorum, Erica, but you're certainly welcome to participate and as both an individual and, share your perspective on the committee.
Yeah.
But we can't vote as a committee this evening because we're not legally posted.
Okay, I will go ahead and share.
Thank you.
Working for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
So, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on the town's sustainability coordinator. In this role, I'm responsible for helping to implement in conjunction with the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, Westford Climate Roadmap to Net Zero by 2050, along with a bunch of other sort of sustainability principles having to do with human health and sustainable resource use. So for those of you who haven't met me, that's kind of my role tonight and throughout the discussion. The Westford Sustainability Bill, and I helped develop the Westford Climate Roadmap as a former member of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. So tonight, I'm here in support of this facilities effort because the roadmap addresses facilities, transportation, electricity. So you'll hear from me about Westford Pop and some of our other members about that throughout the next month. Solid waste, which is also a big topic, and natural resource use and nature-based solutions to some of our climate problems. So it's a big scope, and I rely heavily on the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee to help me cover a lot of these issues. And as such, Beth Perkins has been the initial expert on the library and following this project, and I've become more deeply involved recently as the project's getting off the ground. And so I thank Beth for all of her hard work interfacing with all the committees who are really trying to make this project as sustainable as possible. The Westford Sustainable Building Guidelines were developed by Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee and accepted by the Select Board in March of this year. And so they are an official policy of the town. Just to explain what these things on the screen mean, energy efficiency is the very first focus of any climate and clean energy initiative. It's the most important thing that we can do, really, is to make sure that we're using our energy as efficiently and parsimoniously as possible. an EUI of 25. EUI is energy use intensity, and 25 is a fairly, it was arrived at scientifically in terms of trying to split the difference between something that's achievable, but still fairly aggressive in terms of an energy efficiency that will stand the test of time over the next 50 years. So it is probably the most important goal on this list, but all of them are hefty and important. And the EUI is a proxy really of how well the building functions in the conservation of energy. So it's really talking about the building envelope and weatherization and the same kinds of things that we talk about when you're trying to improve your residential home. First and foremost, you want to weatherize that building. So that's why it's first on the list. The second thing is, as many of you have heard me discuss, there's several huge pools of money at the local, state, and federal level being put to use to encourage climate-friendly, net zero building initiatives and help us move forward with an energy transformation that we need in our economy and in our built environment. And you need to meet certain EUIs and certain standards in order to be eligible for those incentives. And luckily, this project is engaging early and often with Mass Save and their net zero engineering team. And that's part of this first phase that we're going through to make sure that the design will allow us to optimize both the energy efficiency of that building, but also the potential funding that the town could capture associated with it. The next one is zero net energy. What that means is once you have developed the most energy efficient building that obviously meets all your other functional requirements, you may not, you're still going to use some energy. You're not going to, and so the question of zero net energy is then how are you going to offset so that you're not producing carbon? And that's through solar ready PV roofs and canopies, or through buying clean energy. So those are sort of a distant second. First, you want to use as little energy as you can. Then you want to reduce your carbon in the energy that you are using. And you want to electrify, and that's carbon-free energy, moving away from fossil fuels to electrification. And this design is an electric design for this building. As with any infrastructure project, we've designated that we want it to last at least 50 years. You don't build a building and, it's not a disposable resource. We want it to last. We also want, because this is a new transformational technology, our buildings to serve as models and educational resources to the community so that our residents can understand how this new technology works. They can see it working. They can see their energy savings or their energy production from a solar panel. And we can use it as a teaching resource, not just for our youth, but for our community as a whole. And then when we start thinking about the interior of the building and humans functioning in that building, we want it to have a healthy operation, clean air, clean water, no off-gassing of materials. And we want it to be sustainable from an operational cost point of view. So it's a life cycle thinking about the building to make sure that it's healthy, it operates efficiently, it operates in a financially sustainable way, and that people who are using that building find it a pleasant, functional, healthy space to work and visit. Part of that is enabling recycling, getting to our solid waste, making sure that people in that building have all they need to have the behavior that we would like them to have inside that building. So recycling, food waste diversion, otherwise known as composting out there in more of the vernacular. And if you're visiting that building and you have an electric vehicle, you may wish to charge there. So that is also something having to do with, that has to do with the energy transition. It's also part of the building code now to provide electric vehicle readiness, and in some cases also charging stations. And then finally, many of you are probably familiar with the environmental standard called LEED, which predated a lot of this energy change that we're going through now, and actually is a checklist of materials and processes that reduce the impact of the functioning of that building on the environment and keep it healthier for human health. And so the thought was that this standard, version 4.1 silver, or if possible platinum, get us close to a building that functions with a minimum of environmental impact in general. So those are the summary, high-level explanation of what our standards are and what we would like to see in any building going forward, and this building in particular. And the link to the actual detail, if you're interested in a more in-depth explanation, is here in the QR code and in the link. So if you want to take a picture of that. I kind of rushed through that. I'm open to questions if anyone has any about the standards that we have here in town. Okay. Beth has her hand raised.
I just might add for the last one on LEED that we did state within the guidelines that we wanted to utilize the checklist and go through the checklist, but that the projects didn't necessarily have to be certified, because we know that's an expensive and heavy manpower effort. So the guidelines are that we would go through the checklist, but not necessarily certify the project.
So I think, thank you for that clarification, Beth. That's an important distinction. If there aren't any more questions, I think we'd like to hear from all of you about what you would like from the building, and I could turn it over to Rebecca to give more.
Yep. Thank you, Sue. So,
well, I think actually next on the list was, we were going to hear on the agenda, I'm sorry, is the MBLC. We're going to hear from them, I think, on the agenda is next.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to talk about the MBLC. So this project falls under our 2015 regulations, which are regulations that were crafted before, obviously, our roadmap to a net zero future for the Commonwealth. But we have embraced Executive Order 594 and an all-electric and if possible, net zero future for our library buildings. However, we can't mandate that because of the regulations under which this project falls. We do require the projects to evaluate the life cycle costs of their HVAC systems and any systems in the building to make sure that they are getting the most efficient and energy saving equipment as possible to run their buildings for what we deem in our regulations 20 years of operation for the building, at least 20 years. We did offer a green library incentive with this particular grant round. However, Westford opted not to pursue that, and that's fine, because from what was just said, that was just to offset the cost of applying for the certification. So it didn't even cover the full cost of applying for certification. So that is just something to be aware of. And obviously, we do encourage all of the pathways for the utility incentives that you can get from both the state and federal level. So we really are in support of all of these sustainability goals. And if there are any questions that I can answer about the MBLC, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Andrea. Ellen, do you want to talk about the next item on the agenda about the recording and substance of meetings?
So
Just briefly.
we just want to be sure everyone understands that the recording of the meeting and any materials in the chat file will be kept and will be forwarded to the joint library building committee. And we're capturing everything and recording it both in hard copy and virtually so that we can produce minutes and share this. And I'll send it back to Rebecca.
Great, thank you, Ellen. All right, I'm going to reshare. So we're going to run through a relatively tight agenda that has to do with a few items, including, and most importantly, really talking about the process of achieving sustainability for a project. So this is our small agenda this evening. We're going to talk about schedule, this process. We're going to talk about the stretch code and the plan for compliance with the stretch code. We're going to talk about options for those systems that Sue was talking about earlier, the systems that we are creating that are all electric for this building so that we can be on the path to net zero and in the spirit, at least, of Executive Order 594, Andrea. And also finally talk a little bit about a couple of energy conservation measures that are being considered above and beyond what we're doing in terms of compliance with the stretch code at the moment. So we're going to start with a brief note, which we feel is very important for all of us. And that is, where are we in this process, right? This is a rough project schedule for the J.B. Fletcher Library here for all of us in Westford. And we are here in schematic design at the far left side of this very long bar chart, right? And all of this is to say that we are early in the design process. And so we want folks to understand that we are in the process of making decisions. You know, final decisions come later. This is why we're having this forum and why we're talking through the issues and talking about how we are going to get to as sustainable a building as possible. In addition to understanding where we are in the process, we're going to talk a little bit about our process and how we work with towns, with users such as library groups, with citizens to achieve sustainable built products. So it begins here where we are in schematic design, so that you are here, this is where we are, okay? And one of the first things that has to happen is a big kickoff, right? We get all of the stakeholders together and talk about what the goals are so that we can confirm that everybody is moving in the same direction. And we establish what we call OPRs and BOD. OPR is short for the owner's project requirements. So for instance, all of those things that Sue just talked about fit in owner's project requirement bucket, right? What is it that you all are trying to achieve as a town, as library trustees, et cetera, right? Those are the project requirements that we're going to work toward. And then this other term, basis of design, that's sort of our platform from which we're going to work. So for instance, right now we're talking about an all electric building. That's as a basis of design requirement, right? Like that's where we're starting. And you heard also this discussion about energy use intensity. We're going to establish that target energy use intensity, that EUI, that 25 number that Sue talked about, because if we start, as Sue said, low, it is easier to think about being net zero ready, because the first thing that we have to do is reduce consumption, right? So we establish that EUI as part of this early work where we're saying really what are the goals for the project. And we also at the same time establish the base sustainability framework. This is a larger approach to the building and to the project or the facility, which deals with some of those other things such as human health. How are we going to think about creating a healthy building? What are we going to think about in terms of materials that we use? How are we going to think about, what happens once the building is operated, the control systems, how the building works so that we make sure that it continues on the path that it's supposed to be continuing on to use low energy. And one of the ways that we do this is we construct a sort of baseline evaluation. We construct an energy model. Folks have probably heard this term. Basically what it is you feed information into this model in terms of what are you doing for the envelope of the building, right? Like what are the walls made of? What's your skin? What's the facade? What kind of glazing are you using? How much insulation here? How much insulation there? And that all goes into the model together with a specified mechanical system that Ken's going to talk about a little bit later. And we say, okay, are we meeting that EUI target? Where are we at? And how do we get there? This is also important because this is a tool that we work with groups like Mass Save with to determine our incentives and make sure that we're hitting targets so that you all can take advantage of these utility and potentially even federal incentives. Now there's an interesting little piece here. You see this word potential test well. This has to do with geothermal systems, which Ken is going to talk about in a little bit. Folks may have heard this term. Ken will explain it a little bit more, but one of the things that you have to do if you're really considering geothermal is test the ground conductivity, meaning if you're going to use the ground as a heat sink, how well is it going to perform for you so that you understand what you need to do for that geothermal system. And you want to do that early because that's going to drive a lot of decision making later on through this process that you see. You see MEP system selection here at the bottom. Again, we're going to talk about that later because you need to choose early, right? And then you see this little note here, which is really germane to our firm, FA Sustainability Champion. We have an in-house sustainability team. And one of the things that happens is right out of the gate, we assign a member of that team to every single project. That person's role is to be our guide, to sit on our shoulder, to tap on us and say, hey, how's it looking for sustainability for this project, right? As we go through this process. Now, the next sort of phase in sort of typical architectural design is what we call design development, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're getting more refined. So you see here, we're taking that bigger sustainability framework and we're kind of starting to put some details and some, flesh on those bones, right? And we're doing more energy modeling and we're doing more deep analyses of the building. Now, for instance, you'll see this funny little acronym WOOFY. To be honest, I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head what all the letters are, but what this really means is you're looking at an existing building construction and determining what you can do to make it more energy efficient. This is obviously important for this project because we have an existing building, we have a new addition, right? And we have to think about those both together, but also in their separate parts because they require different approaches. And then the other thing that you're doing as you get into this design development is you're starting to get into the inside of the building, where Sue talked about, what are the materials, how healthy are they, how environmentally friendly are they? So you're looking at these materials and you're getting into what we call the specifications, which is this big, heavy book, which basically tells your CM and everyone what's going to go in the building, not just drawings that show how it's made, but what are the materials and what are their specifications. Here you see this other note about FA Green specifications. We have an in-house specification checklist that goes out to our specifications writers. It goes to our engineers, where we make reference to giving preference, for instance, to products that have what are called environmental product declarations. What that means is that the manufacturer of the product is publicly telling everybody the environmental impact of that product. This is something that's come up over the last few years, and we find this is an easy way for us to make sure that we're accounting for the environmental impact of our work. And then you see this Mass Save incentive analysis also that's going to be going on at the same time. So while you're looking at all these interior materials, the specifications, you continue to work with your partners like Mass Save, do more energy modeling, and really kind of dial in where the incentives are going to find themselves. And at the same time, one of the big things that you do through a design process is what we call quality assurance, quality control, right? You're checking the documents. We have a sustainability portion of this QA/QC that happens throughout our processes at Feingold Alexander. Now, eventually you get to this wonderful phase called construction documents. And this is where, as we say here, your goals are becoming your details, right? The drawings are getting very specific because eventually they're going to be put out for bids by contractors. So you're doing things like finalizing and confirming your MEP system specs. So all the pieces and parts of equipment are going to be on these drawings. All the final material specifications and selections are going to be on the drawings. You're going to do a final run of your energy model to make sure, yes, you've hit the target. We are go, all systems headed into the next phase of construction. The other thing that happens when you're doing this level of drawing, and this is super important with the new energy code that we're going to talk about, is in your drawings, you're going to be super explicit about how you are air sealing the building. This is part of the new code. And the purpose of this is to deal with the biggest enemy you have for energy transmission, and that is air coming into your building. That's your biggest problem, right? So we want to keep the air out. We want to do what we call energy recovery that I'll let Ken talk about in more detail, so that we drive the energy use down and we keep that hot or cold air out of the building. We keep the conditioned air in the building. And then we get to construction, what we call construction administration, which is basically just now we're going to build the building, right? So we're going to be closely coordinating with the construction manager or sometimes called the general contractor on the documentation, on the details, and we're really going to be driving home the need for excellent execution of all of our details. This is really critically important now with the new code, that windows are installed the right way, that vapor barriers are sealed and taped and installed in a way that doesn't let that air in that we were talking about, or air out, conversely. So then there's this last piece, post occupancy, right? You may say, oh, well, the project is done, but no, actually the project's not done, because what we need to do after the project is finished is make sure that it's performing the way we designed it to perform, right? So folks come back 10 months, a year later, take measurements, verify the performance, and do sometimes what's known as like retro commissioning or commissioning, where you may need to adjust some things, right? They're like, okay, well, maybe the T-stats aren't quite behaving the way they need to in this room or that room. So you're going to, do all of that work to really make sure that you have not only designed to your target, but you have actually hit your target in terms of energy use. That was a lot. We can come back for questions later. But next, we want to talk briefly about the stretch code compliance path. Most folks have clearly heard that we have a new energy code in Massachusetts. It is a great code that is putting us, again, on the path toward zero carbon. Now, being a building code, there are some options. There are usually options in codes in terms of how you comply. We find ourselves in an interesting spot as a library, where we are in what's known as the targeted performance path for the new commercial stretch energy code. There's this nice little diagram over here on the right that you can probably see, which tells you it's a flow chart, right? How big are you? Oh, you're over this many square feet. Go here. Are you an addition? Oh, go here. Are you a library? Very specifically, go here to targeted performance, right? What that means is quite literally you're trying to hit a number, right? And there are two options for that path of targeted performance within the stretch energy code. One is known as TEDI, which stands for thermal energy demand intensity. And then there's passive house. Many people have probably heard of passive house. Some folks may not have heard of TEDI. But because of the type of project that we are, and in consultation, for instance, with folks at the DOER, the Department of Environmental Resources, who administer the new energy code, we have confirmed, for a set of reasons that we'll walk you through, that following the TEDI path makes the most sense for this project. So the interesting thing about TEDI, which is a little bit different than some of the older codes, is that it is really focused on energy demand. So you're trying to drive your demand as low as possible for the project. And you're going to do that by making a very good envelope so that mechanical systems can be right-sized, right? So that you have reduced sizes of equipment, less distribution, et cetera, less heating demand and less cooling demand in the building through this airtight and high performance envelope. Now, this is particularly important for this project because, as we noted earlier, and as folks know, there is an existing component to the project and there is an addition. And TEDI allows us to treat these two differently for very good reasons. The first reason being that existing construction was built to a certain standard at a time, and we're not necessarily changing everything in the building. So what happens is if we touch it, we change it, we upgrade it, we improve it. But TEDI says, if you don't touch it, you don't touch it. And it allows you to treat the addition of the building separately from the existing building. So you make improvements where you can to the existing building, you build the addition to the building completely with this airtight, super high performing envelope, and you understand that these two are going to perform differently. So when you do testing, you do it separately. But the great thing is, because you have really driven this energy demand way down, you're going to get a really high performing building out of the project. You're going to hit very low EUIs and put yourself in a position to potentially reach zero net energy. Another big part of the picture is the options for your mechanical systems, right? For your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So I'm going to key through these and let Ken talk through, each one of these slides here, we have sort of 3 areas we're looking at for potential mechanical systems. Ken, I think you're muted.
Yep. Good evening. I'm Ken Beck, Principal of BLW Engineers in Littleton, Mass, right next door to you. So we looked at 3 different systems for this project. They were all electric, no fossil fuels involved. And each system would have a heat recovery component to it. Rebecca is right. Air is not your friend when you want to save energy. So, but we have to have ventilation air for these spaces. So what we do is we provide ventilation air through a heat recovery unit that uses balanced ventilation and the exhaust air to precondition the air that goes into the building. The heat recovery units are about 80% efficient in the heating mode and probably 60 to 65% in the cooling mode. So you save a tremendous amount of energy for a volume of energy that is needed continuously during the occupied day. The first system that we looked at was the variable refrigerant flow heat pumps. This is a refrigerant to air system. It's all electric. It's very quiet. The outdoor unit sits either at grade or on the roof, and one unit can serve multiple units, and it can do simultaneous heating and cooling. That means you're one office, and the next office wants heating, and your office wants cooling. You're able to do that from the same outdoor unit. Each occupied space would have its own individual thermostat.
You want to go to the next one, Ken?
Sure.
Okay.
Air source heat pumps. So this is an air to water system. So what that does is it's able to produce about 130 degree heating water and then 45 degree chilled water. So you would have fan coils within the building that would use either heating water or chilled water to do your heating and cooling. The indoor units are quiet again because the compressors are outside. And depending on how you pipe the system, you can do simultaneous heating and cooling. It just takes a little more piping to do that. Each space would have its own thermostat for its comfort control. This option would have water running to the outdoors through the air to water heat pumps. So there would be some type of either heat trace on that or glycol in the system. And depending on the volume of the system, you might need storage tanks to have enough water volume in the system so it doesn't short cycle. Ground source heat pumps. So ground source heat pumps are using the natural temperature of the earth. So typically it's about 50 to 55 degrees. And New England's a perfect place for ground source heat pumps because we are able to disperse the heat in the winter and absorb the heat, you're able to offset the temperatures of the cooling season and the heating season so that you never overheat or overcool the ground surrounding the wells. We like to use closed loop systems. Open loop systems have had their problems over the past using groundwater. Not this past year, but the year before, we had a very dry summer, and there were areas of the country that had problem with open wells because they got low and they didn't have the water demand they needed to do the cooling during the summertime. So this is water to water heat pumps. We draw the water from, we circulate the water through the ground to pre-cool or preheat it, and we send that to a heat pump that either heats the water or cools the water and sends it to fan coils within the building. The heat pumps of themselves would be in a mechanical room. They would not be in the building space. So the compressor is not within the occupied building. Again, very quiet system once you're out in the building. Each space has the ability to heat or cool, and you would have individual thermostats. This may or may not require storage tank depending on the volume of the system, and it requires multiple outdoor ground wells.
Thanks, Ken.
Yep.
So our last bit here is just to mention a few what we call elective energy conservation measures that we are looking at. ECMs, as they're known sort of colloquially, are very important, for instance, when you're dealing with utility incentives, because these are ways that we can take that kind of base EUI, that base energy use intensity that we're looking at, and potentially crank that down even lower, right? And get to a lower EUI, which again, assists with incentives, assists with getting us to true Z&E. So we have sort of 3 areas that we're looking at. The first is air infiltration. So as we've talked about, air is not your friend. Provide it mechanically, condition it via energy recovery. We do have this existing building, and we do have ways that we can potentially think about providing for more air sealing at the existing building. Some of them more intensive and expensive than others. So this will be a discussion and a trade-off and something to explore and think about how we can help make the existing building more airtight, for instance. You'll see, interestingly enough, geothermal wells listed here as an energy conservation measure when Ken just talked about it as a mechanical system. It is both. So geothermal, otherwise known as water to water heat pumps using the ground as a heat exchanger, is a very efficient system and does bring down your energy use intensity. Now you'll see there's a note here about, numbers of wells, how deep they are. This is why you do that test well, otherwise known as a ground conductivity test, early, is so that you can better peg like how many of these wells you would need, how deep they would have to go. But this is a good estimate at the moment that we're working with as we start thinking about this. And the third one is HVAC demand control ventilation. And Ken, I want you to stop me if I misspeak on this one, because this can get a little technical. So why don't you take it from here?
So basically what we do is we monitor the CO2 in the spaces. Most control companies now make a combination temperature sensor and CO2 sensor that we can use to control the ventilation to the spaces. Again, ventilation is not our friend. It's a huge energy demand to the building. If we have to design the system for full occupancy. So if you have spaces that have limited occupancy or no occupancy, we can dial down the ventilation based on actual occupancy of the space. So you may be running 10% of ventilation for 2/3 of the day in a space when you don't need the 100%. So it's a very cost-effective way to save energy very quickly.
Thank you, Ken. So this concludes our brief presentation on where we are in terms of process and how we're going to be talking about moving forward. And so we are ready to move on to discussion.
Okay, I saw Mr. Morse's hand up for a little bit. So if Mr. Morse would like to, I think Christina, you may need to unmute him, but so we can ask his question.
Yes,
And again, just on all these questions, we're just going to, we may or may not be able to, the design team may or may not be able to answer all the questions tonight, but as a reminder, this is being recorded, and we will find a way to communicate back the answers thoroughly, but we just want to hear from everyone. So Mr. Morse?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I actually have about 25 questions, which I have already given into the team, so I won't belabor those, but I just want to pick on a couple. Because I was surprised to see that the EUI estimate for the building to match up with the goal of 25, knowing that the building is around 72 today, a lot of its historic components, and I just want to make sure that analysis was in depth enough to say with confidence that EUI of 25 is attainable and affordable with the current design approach that you have. And I guess that's a question for, FAA to address.
So the short answer is we're going to be able to hit 25. We have good confidence in the approach that we're taking, in particular with respect to the new energy code. And one of the reasons that we will say that we have good confidence in this is that this team is currently working on a very similar library project where we are able to crank the EUI down for a building which is a historic building with an addition. So it's a very similar approach that we're taking to the two.
And I assume you're talking about the Jones Library in Amherst.
Correct.
Okay, that's your example. The other question, couple of questions I had related to design goals and specifications. It was mentioned that you want to have a very high efficiency, healthy building, but I don't think the Westford design goals specify what CO2 level you want to have in the building. I know that a good healthy building would probably want to say, keep it below 800 parts per million, but I don't see that in the municipal guidelines. And when does the town have to establish a working specification in that area around healthy indoor air quality? Would that be now, today, or the next 2 weeks, or when would that need to be established?
Well, that's typically our goal, about 800. And a lot of it depends on what the background CO2 is as well. I don't expect it to be high in Westford, but that's typically where our goal starts, is 800, and that's where our set points start.
Okay. I'm only going to pick on two other of these 30 questions, so I'll take up all of your time. But the Westford guidelines do not have a number associated with embedded carbon in terms of life cycle carbon emission. And the question is do you have an in-house design guide that you normally use as, sustainability architects, or is that something that the Westford community has to work with you to establish a hard number to talk about what types of materials you're going to use in this new construction?
If the intent is to try to hit a target for embodied carbon, then that is something that we should be discussing together, because this is a very different discussion depending on building type, reuse, new construction, etc. Right? So we don't necessarily have like a number. This is more of a project conversation with the town.
Okay. And the last question I'll put to Ken, which is the HVAC systems that you are contemplating. Do any of them require auxiliary heat for very low temperature conditions in the winter?
No.
No. Okay. Right answer. So we can go with an all electric system with confidence here that we don't have to bundle up with sweaters or bring our own space heaters to the building.
Not unless you run cold. But all these systems are proven to operate down to -14. We have no issue. We have several of these all electrical systems throughout the state, in Maine, in Upper New Hampshire, with no issues whatsoever without backup.
Okay, perfect.
The other, I'll add one note to that too. So there's both the efficiency of the system, but then there's also the envelope, right, that contributes to thermal comfort. And when designing an envelope to meet, for instance, TEDI standards, one of the things that you will do is you will work to eliminate that kind of skin loss, that radiative loss, for instance, like at your glazing, because it's going to be a much more high performing system than we're all used to. We're all used to sitting next to, frankly, like single pane windows in old buildings in New England, right? Where you get convective air currents. The envelope is going to be designed such that that does not happen.
Okay, good. Because when I look at I'll call it the non-engineered illustration of the building concept, there's quite a bit of glass on the north face, quite a bit of glass. And
right.
That seems sort of contrary to the goals and aspirations of this building being a very tight, energy efficient, low EUI with so much glass.
So one thing to note is that the building is only about 30% glazed as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually a pretty good spot to start from. And just as a reminder, we're all the way on the left of the process, right? We're gonna work our way through the design and see where we end up.
Okay, very good. That's it for me tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see Erica Cole's hand up. Erica?
Hi, yeah, like Paul, I had a handful of questions. They pretty much fall into three categories. One, I just wanted to ask a little insight about the model, about the QA/QC, and then also the life cycle cost. Do you want me to ask them individually? One at a time?
Yes, I think so, because they might be addressed by different people, maybe and maybe not. So why don't you ask them one at a time?
Okay, so regarding the model, I'm wondering, is there some sort of guideline that has to be adhered to for the pedigree of the model? Is it validated? How does it get constructed so that we can be confident in the output of this model? And then I'm hoping to further that with, an understanding of, does the model get revisited over the course of the effort so that we can be sure that we're still on the right path? I assume that's probably what QA/QC is doing, but you can talk to that. But specifically, I am curious about the model itself and how we can be certain that we should be confident in the model and its outputs.
Rebecca, that sounds like you.
Actually, this
You
is
can
this
tell
is
me
all
I'm
Ken.
wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
So actually, we use a consultant that all they do is energy modeling. So they specialize in energy modeling. They do it they actually are contracted by the utilities to do their custom rebate programs. So they're very, very good at what they do. And so we actually already had a model built and did some of these evaluations on some of these ECMs and different systems. But we will be updating it as we go. As the building changes, as the systems get refined, the model will be updated at every step.
I'll just throw in there that also we are working with Mass Save, who will be working with us to check everybody's homework to make sure we're staying in alignment as well.
Oh, great.
And if I could add one thing to, when we submit for a building permit, the model data has to be submitted as well.
Okay, great. My next question was regarding the my real focus is understanding what outputs we'll get, and I'm presuming that we would be able to get some reporting from the QA/QC folks, but I guess I'm hoping for that insight as to whether or not, what is their relationship to the overall process? Are they, you said that they're there with, the little angel on your shoulder to remind you to think about sustainability, but what sort of outputs do we get from them so that we can say, we are on the right path? Is there any reporting that we can rely on as the customer?
So to be clear, the in-house sustainability champions are in-house here at FA, and what they provide is, as I noted, a sort of a checklist, right? So when we're going through our own internal quality assurance, quality control procedures at each milestone in the design, making sure that the documents are good quality, that they provide the information that's needed for bidding, that's required for, approval by the town. Included in those checklists are questions around sustainability. So for instance, have we double checked that energy model? Have we had the meetings we need to have with Mass Save, that type of thing? So there's not a report produced by that group.
Okay, that's fair. I can understand that the QA can be internal and that's fine. I guess then I'm still wondering though about how we gain insight over the course of the project into the sustainability status. Like, I saw that there were cost estimating 3-week periods in the process. Maybe we can get some status reporting at those times, or I don't know how do we gain insight over the course of the project?
Yeah, the energy model will produce a report that shows where we are in terms of energy usage, but it'll be broken up by type, whether it's mechanical, lighting, power, etc. And it also will give you the kWh per year, your energy costs, your EUI, your tons of CO2. So it does give you a lot of information when they produce that report.
Is that a one-time report? Again, I'm really hoping to understand over the course of the project.
No, they've already probably done it twice already. So, so we will update that as we go. Every time we run the model, that report is automatically generated.
And given to us?
I guess it could be. I would assume it would be.
We'll figure out a way again to share that information, to communicate that out.
And then the last question thank you for that. And then the last question I had was regarding what I heard from the MLBC. Did I get that right?
MBLC.
MBLC. That life cycle costing is required, which is fantastic. And I heard that the like the geothermal had like a 50-year lifespan. Is that life cycle cost estimating done by you guys, I assume? And what sort of life horizon were you looking to? For instance, if we're hearing that it's a 50-year project, sorry, life for those things, is that what you would choose? Or how does the horizon for the life cycle costing get decided?
Yeah, we'll do that once we get a little more in down the road here. But the life cycle cost, to be clear, the geothermal wells are 50 years. Everything inside of the building is 25 years, like the other systems.
Okay.
The wells are the things that cost you extra money, but they have a 50-year life. They have a 20. Everything inside the building has a 25-year life, similar to the other systems.
Okay, so that's what you would probably use.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. That was my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Teller, Tom Teller, you typed a note. I'll read it unless you'd rather say it out loud. The question was, you addressed the stretch code briefly. Will you address planning steps to meet requirements of the specialized opt-in code that is being considered for adoption by Westford as soon as this spring? So I don't, Rebecca or Ken, I'm not sure which one of you that's appropriate.
I can hop in. So
Okay.
we are in the process of working up an analysis of meeting stretch and then what would be required for the specialized opt-in. What in addition might be required should Westford adopt the code. But that's
in progress.
That's in process.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we're going to, and I think that in that process, you're going to present to the decision-making body, because there may or may not very well be cost implications to stepping up to specialized, and they need to understand that and make an informed decision, correct?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay. So we're not quite there yet, but I think we're looking to be there soon. Okay. And Beth Perkins, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. We were discussing earlier the fact that it looks like we're going to be following Teddy. And one of the components of Teddy that was mentioned was that it would apply, measurements would apply to the new addition rather than the whole building. And I just wanted to ask a question then about EUI, which we've talked about many times, and an EUI of 25 as being our goal. And I believe every time, you know, in this group that we've talked about EUI, it has been a goal that we're looking to for the entire building.
Correct.
So I just don't want to get caught in confusion later about, are we going to be measuring the energy efficiency of the addition or of the entire library? And with the EUI, I was under the assumption we were looking at the total library.
You are.
Okay.
The EUI is the entire project, the whole building, addition, existing together. The difference with Teddy is that when you do the air infiltration testing, and this is critical, you are able to separate the addition from the existing, because an existing building without significant modifications will never meet a current blower door test, right? So that's sort of where that's one key aspect of the difference between the addition and the existing building. But when you calculate, like when Ken and we and Andelman and Leland are running that energy model, we are looking at the whole structure. Okay. So the EUI is for the whole structure. It's just that you can take a slightly different approach in your component selection and how you do your insulation and your windows and stuff to the two different parts of the building that's allowed under code. Does that answer your question, Beth? Does that clarify? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Morse, I see your hand up again. Mr. Morse, I believe you're muted.
Good. Okay. Sorry about that. My question relates to solar. And we didn't really talk about a solar installation concept or desire yet, but it seems to me that there should be sort of a trade study on rooftop or canopy, parking lot canopy solar. You know, because most recently we've lost a very large tree next to the building on the, I guess it would be on the west side of the building, that, you know, opens up a lot of what I call solar space that's now sort of available. But on the other hand, balancing that is that there's a historic facade to the building. And I personally would prefer that we don't mess around with the facade, but put the solar back in the back parking lot where we might actually have more solar gain than the roof available on the historic building itself. So I would hope that you're going to do a trade study about where would we locate, first of all, how much solar can we get on site anywhere, and what would be the best option for siting solar. And I'll just raise my preference for personally would be on a parking lot.
Ongoing conversation, Paul. Absolutely.
Okay, good.
We should, however, make one note, which is that under the new energy code, you do have to designate an area of roof as potential for solar. Now, the good news is with the way the building is structured, we could find some area that's not, you know, visible to the street side.
Okay, good. Yeah, I didn't know whether the historic commission, state or local, would have some jurisdiction over, you know, messing with the facade and the look of the building from a, you know, street level view. That's probably something Ellen Rainville would know better than I.
But if I could jump in, Paul, so we are looking at solar on the addition roof only because of that.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
But Paul, we are discussing whether or not canopies in the parking lot, which up until now had not really been part of the discussion, might be included, at least first in assessing how much energy they might produce, and then thinking about what that might look like if we were to choose to go ahead with canopies in the parking lot. But it's an addition to the scope from 2016.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing discussion.
Okay, it's my understanding that the MBLC doesn't cover the cost of solar panels. It covers the cost of infrastructure. And I don't know whether that includes, let's say, the steel frame to hold the canopy in the parking lot.
It would not.
Does not,
And
okay.
again, this is under the 2015 regulations. It's a little bit different in the 2022 ones. But the 2015 regulations, it would be the infrastructure that is used to basically be the conduit of the gain from the solar panels to the building, but not the actual solar panels themselves or the equipment. So
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Perkins, I see your hand up.
Yes, just wanted to add that in the discussion of things being out of scope of the project, we did get an additional 3.2 million roughly added to this project that was approved at town meeting for additional sustainability measures. So the fact that we didn't think about these things back in 2016 doesn't necessarily mean that they're out of scope and they can't happen, because we did allocate $3.2 million for additional sustainability work for the project.
Mr. Morse, do you have another question, or is your hand just still up?
I'll put it down. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'm just asking.
Alicia, would you ask Dick Coleman if he still has a question? He had his hand up and took it down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Coleman, did you have something you wanted to, I missed that. Did you have something you wanted to ask?
No, I was just actually making a test run.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions? We'd be happy to hear questions. Okay, it's great. I think as we march along the schedule that Rebecca shared at the beginning, the design team will continue to study these things, and we will find an appropriate way to respond out, to share and communicate the issues raised tonight. We'll figure out the correct way and to share that. I don't have that answer right now.
I just wondered, do we have, I was asked this earlier today and I was trying to remember if I had seen it somewhere. This is the first of two public large discussions. Where in the time frame is the second one likely to fall? Do we know?
I'm not sure at this time.
Okay. I just wanted to be able to let people know to look out for it. That was all.
I'm thinking after the holidays, because I'm not sure we're gonna be able to fit it in beforehand, but I don't know. I'll let the design team advise us when they think it should, when we'll have enough information, because we want to make good use of everybody's time.
It sounds like we'll just keep you posted. I just wanted to be able to let preview,
Yep.
people's calendars if I could. Thanks.
Yep. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Alrighty then. Well, thank you all for your time. I appreciate your patiently listening and participating. And we'll all work together to make this a great project.
And the trustees will formally close with a roll call vote if you want to ask for a motion to adjourn, Lynn.
I guess, could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Was that Glenn?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll second it. And here's the vote in Claremont.
Aye.
Dirks, aye. Fleckner is not here. Roach is not here. Secor,
Aye.
Keel.
Aye.
So it passed 4-0-0 at 8:08 p.m.
Thanks for all the information.
Thank you.